Do you want to play rough? Okay.
No.
Say hello to my little friend.
You can only be on top for so long. Bosses don't last long. If your associates don't get you, the law gets you. Just that simple.
This is horrible. This is violent. Why do I like this? But there's something very strangely entertaining about it.
Gangster films are the westerns of modern times. The outlaw gives America a mythology all its own.
You rip and you steal and you murder to get what you want.
There's a lot of businessmen that make money illegally too, right, on Wall Street. But the thing is, they don't go out and do it with a gun, or they don't do it with a baseball bat.
From D.W. Griffith to The Sopranos, we closely follow the rise and fall of the mob.
I was blessed, the lack of a better word, with a temper. This is kind of sometimes a touchy subject with me, because everybody thinks I'm a gangster to start with.
Hollywood has always found fascination with the gangster, and in turn, the gangster finds his persona in Hollywood.
You need people like me so you can point your fucking fingers and say, that's the bad guy.
It's an appealing subject. They'll survive forever.
No.
Still alive,
No.
fucking piece of shit.
If the gangster had never existed, Hollywood would have invented him. Viewed through the camera lens darkly, each continues to refocus the other.
As far back as I can remember, I always wanted to be a gangster.
The fantasy of gangland has always exerted a pull upon the imagination of Hollywood. The criminal lifestyle has also exerted a pull on mob-struck youths.
Criminals are inherently interesting. Movies make them dynamic. Whether we are attracted to them or repelled by them, we can't stop watching.
Put that gun out when I get good and ready. That friendship stuff don't mean a thing to me. This guy's got enough on us to... You won't talk. He better not.
Gangland films play to packed houses, time and again a proven box office draw.
It's a concept that they believe that the gangster has the ultimate power. You have the power to stand up and take the blows.
The mythology starts here. New York City at the turn of the 20th century. Italian, Jewish, and Irish immigrants flow into New York City's Lower East Side. The Lower East Side becomes the arena for the hopes, dreams, and fears that America holds for the immigrant.
They love being here. All those people who were extremely discarded, they saw America, it was reverence, and they were willing to be the bricklayers and build the subway.
But some found a quicker way, an alternate economy, the American dream turned inside out, where the gangster not only survives, but thrives. Pure American values become completely distorted.
People always want to get away with murder. That's why they like gangsters. The American habit.
crime becomes a way of life.
Gangster films do reflect at least a part of American life. The first waves of immigration assimilated and became essentially the Anglo-Saxon WASP establishment. The later waves of the Irish, the Italian, the Jewish, all encountered prejudice. And you find that in the mobs, they were fighting their way up, sometimes outside the system.
Gangsters are seen as victims of a depressed environment. Kids growing up on the street and forming alliances.
They did it because they were immigrants, and they wanted their children to have better lives than they did. The Jews, the Italians, the Irish, you know, who really didn't have the opportunity to get a good job. They worked at docks, they worked this and that, and they got into these other things. They were willing to take 5 years or 10 years for some crime that they made enough money to get their kids out of the streets and into colleges.
Immigrants who came here, particularly immigrants from Europe, had opportunities to survive without engaging in criminal activity. So I don't think that anyone had no choice but to join the mafia. Obviously, by becoming a gangster, you had an opportunity to make a lot of money illegitimately.
Directed by D.W. Griffith in 1912 and featuring real gangster locations and extras, The Musketeers of Pig Alley was an effective combination of social melodrama and cinema verite. In the 1915 film Regeneration, director Raoul Walsh creates a portrait of one man's inevitable fall into life as a street hoodlum. This beautiful and moving film draws emotional resonance from the soulful performance of Rockcliffe Fellows, whose offhand intensity prefigures the young Marlon Brando. A common theme in gangland films, the hero longs for a life outside of the ghetto. But a gangster can never escape the street. Silent cinema clearly reflects its time, unmasking the evils of an era. Lon Chaney's brilliantly modulated work in the 1920 film The Penalty expands the possibilities of the genre. Deranged, deformed, and death-dealing, Chaney still captures our sympathy while igniting our fear.
The public did look up to and in a weird way admire the gangsters. The gangsters had beaten the system which was capitalism in its purest form.
Taking full advantage of what the government won't allow, stories of gangland crime seize the headlines. In 1920, the government passes the 18th Amendment, prohibiting the sale of alcoholic beverages. Prohibition is the best thing to ever happen to the mob.
They weren't doing anything except selling booze to people, and they were going against the government. That makes you a good guy already. And the public wanted the services of all this booze, and so everybody was happy. The gangsters were happy, the public was happy, the government were the only ones that were unhappy because they weren't getting the revenue.
It was Prohibition that really fueled both gangsterism in a big way, not just in pockets of certain cities, but across the country because of the running of illegal liquor. And that, of course, fueled story writers.
Will you crawl back and tell them we don't want you in with us? Our fight's got nothing to do with liquor and prostitution and dope.
I think he's better get used to the idea, pal. This country is still growing up. Certain diseases, it's better to have when you're still young.
You boys ain't a mild case of the measles. You're the plague. And bastards like him are immune. That's the difference between us and them.
Politicians call for reform, but the public remains enamored with the mob, idolizing gangsters as if they were movie stars. Along with Prohibition comes a tremendous escalation of urban violence, and in the city of Chicago, a war breaks out between rival factions for control of the illegal alcohol business. Notorious, fearless, and ambitious, Alphonse Capone is determined to be the only boss in town.
Capone with the South Side mob and Moran with the North Side mob had dominated Chicago politically and economically, and they had the attention of the media and to a certain extent the admiration of the public.
Famous for his ruthlessness, Al Capone is to become the lasting iconic image in all of gangland cinema.
All right. You go back to that dame, and it's suicide. Suicide for both of you.
I'm talking about staying alive! Try getting it through your cement head that what Moran pulled so far, that's for openers. He wants me. He wants me dead.
Back in the real world, things are escalating. On Valentine's Day in 1929, in an incredibly bold move, Al Capone takes over the Chicago Syndicate, as illustrated in Roger Corman's 1967 film, The St. Valentine's Day Massacre.
I'd always been interested in the St. Valentine's Day Massacre. First, it was the most famous of all the gangland massacres, but also I think it was a high point in the history of mobs in America.
Hello, boys. Something I can do for you?
Yeah, you can shut up. Now line up, all of you, face that wall.
The massacre was so horrifying that it turned people away. They were still fascinated with the mobs, but they were now revolted.
Acclaimed Hollywood writer W.R. Burnett, while traveling with police looking for a good story, is on the scene of the massacre. He takes what he witnesses and creates the novel Little Caesar, which inspires one of the most famous characters ever to appear on screen.
What did I tell you, Rico? Didn't I say to make it clean? Didn't I say no gunplay?
You think I'm going to let a guy pull a gat on me? Any more of these cracks and this is my last job.
The head of the Crime Commission. The big boy can't do us no good this trip. They'll get it dead sure now. What am I going to do?
Well, why don't you go and give yourself up? You're slipping, Sam.
Little Caesar was a wise guy. He was tough, and he was mean, but you kind of liked him.
Al Capone falls from the top to the bottom very quickly.
What finally brought down Capone was the IRS taxes. He had so corrupted the local government that there was no way the Chicago police were going to do anything against Al Capone. And even the FBI, which was in its infancy at that time, did not have enough power to do it. And they didn't have to think about if he'd killed anybody or not. He'd simply falsified his taxes.
I don't want to talk too much about taxes. Stay away from that fucking question, please. I don't want to piss the fucking IRS agent off. We don't cut that stuff. It's cut out, edit it out. I'm serious. I'm dead serious.
Sooner or later, you will end up dead or in jail.
On the other side of the looking glass, it was only the beginning of Rico.
That's all right, boy. Just changing the name on the door.
Al Capone is once again brought to the screen.
Where's Johnny?
What do you think?
Now under the guise of Tony Camonte.
Go pack your stuff.
I never did anything to anybody. I never hurt anybody.
Nah, you give somebody else to do it for you.
The film Scarface contains recreations of actual incidents from Al Capone's life.
Wait! Don't! Hurry, come back! Hurry!
The power of the gangster is at its height during the Roaring '20s and all throughout the Depression of the 1930s. On the screen, violence is more popular than ever. Former Postmaster General Will Hayes is hired to clamp down on the film industry after a succession of scandals in Hollywood.
Code sets up high standards of performance for motion picture producers. It states the considerations which good taste and community value make necessary in this universal form of entertainment.
Hollywood was forced to put prefaces and caveats at the beginning of the film saying, we're not trying to glorify gangsters. And Howard Hughes was obliged to call his movie Scarface the shame of a nation. Absurd. He wasn't portraying him as the shame of the nation. He was portraying him as a really compelling character. That's why people wanted to see him. But they had to go through that hypocrisy to satisfy the morals of the time and the guardians of the morals of the time.
The result of this friction are pre-code films, inundated with sex, drugs, and perversity of all kinds that exist in a steadily eroding climate of repression. The production code would not be enforced until 1934, so until that time, it was anything goes.
He was a Yankee. He used to take me a lot to the movies, you know. I learned. I watched the guys like Humphrey Bogart, James Cagney. They teach me to talk. I like those guys.
At the height of the Depression, box office sales soar. On the screen and in the streets, gangster types materialize. 3 actors stand out above all the rest.
Them up. You know just where I was hiding, didn't you? Well, you made a mistake. Not as big a mistake as you're liable to make. Well, lucky last time, but you ain't gonna be now.
These men leave an impression that would last for decades, each with his own distinctive archetypal characteristics. James Cagney wears the mask of a psychopathic killer. No one gets in his way. Edward G. Robinson is always charismatic as the manipulative bully. Humphrey Bogart is the introspective outlaw who appears reluctant to play the role.
I think there are a lot of actors today who try to bring that kind of power to the screen and do bring a great deal. But I don't think they were anything like Bogart, Cagney, Robinson. They're one of a kind.
What was so smart about the producers back in the day when Edward G. Robinson and Cagney, they made you love the guy. No matter what he did, no matter how many people he killed, you loved him. And when he got caught, you cried. You were very unhappy when they killed James Cagney. But before that, he was a bad dude. He had killed a whole bunch of people. But we still cared about the guy.
James Cagney said if you play a character that's very evil and very maniacal, that you need to find something noble within that person, or else your performance is going to be one note. And if you play somebody who's very, very noble, you need to find something dark within that person.
You don't like the racket I'm in, you don't like the people I know, the things I do, and it's not me, it's what I stand for, am I right? But I'm not going to let that stand between you and me. You want the Brooklyn Bridge, all you got to do is ask for it. If I can't buy it, I'll steal it.
As for the underworld thing, I don't think they'll get much time from now on, but I'll do them when I have to.
But you've been so successful in them.
Yes, I know. That's the big difficulty. See, when you play a great many of those parts, you become fixed in the public mind as that kind of character. But the plans are in the future that I play an entirely different variety of roles.
Do any of the roles you portray have any effect on your mood outside of the studio?
No, not at all. I'm perfectly willing at the end of the day to forget all about it and leave everything after it at the studio.
In the old studio days, films were often written, shot, and released in less than a year, allowing screenwriters to lift actual events from the day's headlines and incorporate them into their stories. Darryl Zanuck, then executive producer for Warner Brothers, said, "It is my belief that the producer of pictures today, in searching for entertainment, finds himself in a position similar to that of an editor of a newspaper. They rip the stories from the streets and put them on the screen." Renowned for his crime dramas, Edward G. Robinson is always a big draw at the box office.
Edward G. possessed the qualities that I admire most in actors who play those roles. To be very, very scary, but also be very funny, and be very likable, and be believable and honest.
Look at me. You see me as if you were looking through the wrong end of a telescope. You see the walls of the room waver and sway. In a moment you will have a sensation of falling in space swiftly. You'll hear a rushing sound in your ears.
Eddie had all of those qualities, and I thought that was an amazing feat.
You can make your hopes
Humphrey
come true.
Bogart brings a unique presence to the screen.
For it. See where I'm aiming? Right at your belly.
Through his roles in gangland dramas, he would become one of the most powerful men in Hollywood.
Hey, get that light off me. What's the idea? Oh, just an accident, old man. Nothing to be upset about. Yeah, but don't let no more accidents happen. I ain't no guy you can push around like these other dopes.
Bogart, when he played a gangster, played more the loner, not the deliberate gangster, but the man who was caught in circumstances beyond his control and forced into being an outlaw.
So you're gonna talk. It's the only chance you've got to live.
I'm afraid he'll never die.
He'll die, he's got to die, and you're gonna kill him.
By 1934, there is no escaping the code. Censorship rules over freedom of expression.
Don't be a fool. Let me out of here. Run!
Hollywood films become fully censored. And the repressed American public elevates the outlaw to folk hero, a new type of star. Where the big city bootleggers of the 1920s were of Italian, Irish, or Jewish descent, the small-town bank robbers of the 1930s are American-born and bred. And since their targets are the same institutions that foreclose on people's homes, the public embraces these desperados as heroes, not criminals. Colorful figures like Pretty Boy Floyd, Babyface Nelson, and Bonnie and Clyde dominate the news in the early 30s. But no one captures the public's imagination more than Indiana's John Dillinger. From May 1933 to June 1934, John Dillinger's gang is on a bank-robbing crime spree across the country. Americans root for him as he continuously evades and escapes the law. 33 days after this footage was shot, Dillinger would escape from prison. J. Edgar Hoover, head of the FBI, infuriated with the infamous gangster heroes, goes after them with a vengeance. This time, there will be no escape for John Dillinger. The ultimate irony is that John Dillinger is gunned down in front of a movie theater as he leaves a screening of the gangster film Manhattan Melodrama. Studio head Jack Warner plans to make a film about the notorious Dillinger, but his plans are thwarted by the code's restrictions on glorifying gangsters and outlaws.
It does mean quite definitely that the vulgar, the cheap, and the tawdry is out.
Jack Warner's project is resurrected as High Sierra. The character of Roy Earl embodies much of Dillinger's own charisma.
Remember what Johnny Dillinger said about guys like you and him? He said you were just rushing toward death.
What's the matter, Yellow? Come and get me, buddy. Come and get me.
When it finally appears in 1945, Dillinger is far closer to pure fiction. The role of the gangster is changing, both on screen and off. With the repealing of Prohibition, the gangster becomes less the romantic individual and more the company man, changing with the times, hiding behind legitimate corporations. And the unions bring that gangster, just as legitimately, right back to one of his points of origin, Hollywood.
I remember when I was just a young kid, there was big union activity at Paramount Studios and very violent. They brought in fighters just to cause a great deal of trouble. And I would stand there as a little boy, just watch this whole thing. It was very bad. It was very violent.
When the union organizers came in, some of them were being backed by the mob.
The power and the glamour of cinema has always had a compelling pull on gangland. Benjamin Bugsy Siegel has designs on becoming a movie star, just like his pal, movie tough guy George Raft.
There is the ultimate irony. Benjamin Siegel, enamored of George Raft. George Raft, the make-believe gangster, is a turn-on for Bugsy Siegel, the genuine gangster. Only in America.
Take 5. Marker.
$2 for what? 1 beer and some phony champagne? Here's half a buck. Split it between you.
You're so cheap. You're wholesale.
Don't forget, mister. I asked you nice.
Marker.
Here we go. We're rolling. Quiet, please. Reset.
Lenny, you want to hit somebody with a chair?
I think the studios had to be very careful about who they really tried to make stars out of. I don't think they could have or would have made a star out of Bugsy Siegel. He was a big, good-looking guy and tall, strong, and handsome. He might have made a pretty good star there.
I don't think any studio boss in his right mind would knowingly hire someone like Siegel because they couldn't control him. And those studio moguls were all about control.
At a pivotal juncture in gangster legend, Bugsy invents the city of Las Vegas.
The mob told him not to open up the Flamingo in Las Vegas, and he did. Later on, the mob made a lot of money from the Flamingo because Bugsy Siegel had recommended it. They killed him because they wanted to get rid of him.
His girlfriend, Virginia Hill, is seemingly unaware of the dangerous game they had been playing.
When I was with Ben, he paid for everything.
By Ben, you mean Ben Siegel?
Yes. And he gave me some money, too, and bought me a house in Florida.
10 years after this testimony, Virginia Hill commits suicide.
Most of the gangsters' wives or mistresses or molls, whatever you want to call them, went along with the gangster. And when she says, I want a home, I want a husband, I want a life, I think she was sticking to what she never really had with him.
We know how the story ends, yet we keep watching. Glamour and power are ultimately short-lived. Bugsy's strongest supporter, Meyer Lansky, is the one who gets away.
I'm privy to know the chairman of the board of Stanford. I know, a lot of really intelligent, well-read, and Meyer Lansky is their hero because the guy was a genius. They couldn't pin a crime on him.
Bugsy's mob boss, Charles Luciano, seeks control of the Hollywood unions. Lucky Luciano is convicted of multiple counts of extortion. He is sentenced to 55 years in prison, but is later deported to Italy.
There was one gangster film I was considering when the U.S. government had deported Lucky Luciano back to his native Italy. But in the closing days of the war, when we invaded Italy, we used Lucky Luciano as an agent of the U.S. Army and the U.S. government to open the ports in Sicily, and essentially the mafia worked with the U.S. government and the U.S. Army helping the conquest of Italy.
Post-war America seeks the enemy within. The gangster at the dawn of the 1950s is now a businessman, hidden behind the corporate veil, a caricature of the American dream. John Huston's Key Largo gives us a different gangster with a post-war sensibility.
Nothing to stop me from wiping you all out. What good'll that do, boss? Forget it. Her kind's a dime a dozen.
I say smack her and let it go at that.
Smacking her isn't enough for such an insult. He'd have to kill her. Then he'd have to kill the rest of us because we witnessed it. But to kill us all or nothing.
It is no coincidence that the character of Johnny Rocco is a racketeer being deported to Italy. John Huston models Rocco after Lucky Luciano.
Sure, I was all of those things. And more. When Rocco talked, everybody shut up and listened. What Rocco said went. Nobody was big as Rocco. It'll be like that again, only more so. I'll be back up there one of these days, and then you're gonna really see something.
If the time ever comes when your kind can walk a city street in daylight with nothing to fear from the people.
The time has come, Mr. Temple is here.
Key Largo is a very important film, both because it's a good film, but also because it's a transitional portrayal of gangsters. Now we have Robinson as the gangster and Bogart as the man reluctantly drawn into the fight. The gangster now comes to be identified as the bad guy, as the proto-fascist.
Heroes in real life, Humphrey Bogart and his wife Lauren Bacall are deeply involved in the struggle against reactionary forces in Hollywood, otherwise known as the McCarthy Scare or the Communist Witch Hunt. Lauren Bacall once said, "You have no idea of the fear that has overtaken Hollywood. A producer is afraid to produce, a director is afraid to direct, and a writer is afraid to write." Which means in simple language that good adult entertainment flies out the window and shallow water flows in the door. Occasional masterpieces rise out of an intimidated Hollywood.
Still getting nerves?
After a 10-year absence from criminal roles, James Cagney returns to his gangster persona as Arthur Cody Jarrett in White Heat.
You got a good memory for names. Too good.
Life magazine says that the audience screeches with joy when the hero appears pummeling society with both hands and both feet, a tigerish snarl on his lips.
He's gonna walk us out of here, ain't you?
The old Jimmy is back again.
I said I'd be back. Now tell me you're glad to see me. Only say it low, so nobody can hear.
Cody, I'm so glad to see you. I've been praying you'd come back. I couldn't stand any longer. I was running away.
From Big Ed?
Yeah.
What's the matter? Don't you like him?
No.
In the end, there is no escape for Cody Jarrett. Gangland myth and the code insist the mob hero must be destroyed. A new trend emerges in American cinema, and the film noir hero is born. Hollywood filmmakers find a subtle way around the code. Quite the opposite of Cody Jarrett, the noir hero is subdued, a loner, seemingly normal on the surface, yet seething with anger and rebellion underneath. In 1954, the Union Man rises up against the mob. Marlon Brando gives an unforgettable performance as Terry Malloy in Elia Kazan's On the Waterfront.
Kazan was vilified by many people. for naming names to the House Un-American Activities Committee. And some people found hypocrisy in him being the one to bring to life this movie about Terry Malloy, who stands out.
We've got the fattest piers and the fattest harbor in the world. Everything moves in and out, we take our cut.
The whole point of On the Waterfront is the power of the individual. When that individual stands up for himself, stands up for his rights, and has the courage to do so regardless of the consequences.
You want me my philosophy of life? Do it to him before he does it to you.
It's not coincidental that this was also tied in with the communist witch hunt of the period. People were feeling threatened.
How have you been? This is a great situation.
I'm no good at a thing like this, Lou.
Listen, you know who the pistols are. You're going to keep still until they cut you down one by one?
The director, Elia Kazan, the writer, Bud Schulberg, keenly aware of this.
Friendly! Come on out of there!
You talk yourself in the river.
Any film genre is ripe for parody, and by 1959, Gangland Slaughter makes its way to the screen. The gangster remains an icon, but the image and the realities behind him adjust to the surreal cinema of the 1960s. The new gangster is smooth and witty, with a gleeful, amoral charm. Bugsy Siegel's Las Vegas becomes the new mob playground on a Hollywood film set.
Ocean's 11 is a lighthearted depiction of gangsters. I'm not even sure you can call them gangsters all the way, because it's gangster light. The joke was really on all of us, because at that time, the Vegas they were portraying so colorfully and appealingly was under the control of real gangsters.
I did not have awareness of mafia before the 60s. They didn't use the word, and I was probably too ignorant to know that that meant mafia. The 60s changed everything. And they changed the way movies were, but also they changed the way we were.
1960s cinema brings a new gangster type to the screen. Lee Marvin is enigmatic, mysterious as Walker in the 1967 film Point Blank.
You have to remember that until the late 60s, sex, violence, four-letter words were verboten.
After 34 years of repression, the Hays Code is lifted. And we are introduced to Bonnie and Clyde.
Now, you know, we are just about the friendliest folks you would ever want to meet.
Hey, Buck. Yeah? Get the Kodak. Doggies! Hold it, hold it!
Oh, I do declare.
Director Arthur Penn creates a story filled with sex, glamour, rebellion, and ultimately doom. The gangster is now a tragic figure. An enforced code of ethics no longer exists in Hollywood.
Left, the man, turn left! Left!
Quando è bella, spero tanto sentimento, a me chi tiene a mente, aspettato fai sognar.
Who put this thing together? Me!
fool? Who do I trust? Me!
Several things happened in the late 60s that cleared a path for a new kind of American filmmaking. And they let in the likes of Francis Ford Coppola and Brian De Palma and Martin Scorsese and on and on and on. This unbelievable flowering of talent who probably would have been unemployable 10 years earlier. They were making their films for the major Hollywood studios.
In 1972, Francis Ford Coppola creates a romantic portrait of the mafia family run by Don Vito Corleone. The Godfather trilogy follows a century of the Corleone family.
I resisted The Godfather at first because, in spite of its brilliance, it was about this mob family. And I said, somehow, is this what greatness in American film should represent? Well, I'm wrong. It's mesmerizing. It's a great film.
I don't know if it was art imitating itself or it was self-imitating art. The first time I walked out of that movie, seen The Godfather, I got in the car with my girlfriend, and we're driving down the street. And I remember I went under the seat. I don't take a pistol into the movie with me, but I always carried one with me. There was always one just about a hand's reach away.
The whole film is about loyalties and the price you pay for loyalty and the price you pay for betrayal. And then in The Godfather Part 2, we see how Don Corleone became the man he was, the immigrant who comes to America and finds his own path that then paves the way for another generation.
One of the reasons we love The Godfather, it's very much like, it's epic, it's like Julius Caesar. It deals mythologically. Visually, the cinematographer embraced it in the most extraordinary way, in light and dark, literally.
In Francis's view, I knew that his image of Michael and Sonny were completely different because he wanted Michael to be the old Sicilian-looking Italian, and he wanted Sonny to be the American version of the family. I walk into the office alone, and I'm supposed to go sit behind his desk. So we set it up, and something came over me. It was weird. I couldn't, and Francis just let the camera roll, and I literally couldn't go behind the desk, so I pulled up a chair alongside of it. It was just a subconscious thing. He's not the right guy for the job, he's just too hot-tempered and thinks with his heart and not with his brain.
This is always about royalty. The chair was a throne. It's a chessboard. The dark and the light, and the mafia has its hierarchy. How can chaos be organized? But, all right, it is.
Michael Corleone holds on to his throne by killing off all of his enemies, even if they are his own blood.
Aristotle in the Poetics spoke about tragedy, and he said if an enemy kills an enemy, but if a brother kills a brother, that's tragedy. When you move into family members, we've known it from Shakespeare, when you cross over into that, that's when this family becomes tragic. That is a whole other level of darkness.
Masked in cinematic beauty, the Corleone family is steeped in evil.
It's hypnotic, so beautifully, perfectly crafted. The look, the feel, the atmosphere, the writing, the acting.
Amongst an exceptional cast, the head of this family is magnificently portrayed by Marlon Brando.
The only guy that was influential to all of us was Brando, but not as a gangster, but as an actor. He was probably the most influential actor ever, certainly to anybody in my era, because he, without a doubt, was worldwide the most influential.
Mafia codes are strict. The oath of blood demands loyalty, obedience, and especially omerta, silence.
In the 50 years, there were 2 rats, Avi Relis and Valachi. I mean, and that was it. I mean, there's something really noble and, again, sort of romantic about the notion that you never, ever, you don't rat on anybody. The prisons are full of rats, you know, now.
Back then, they were into loan sharking, gambling, prostitution. And then when they went to jail, they got 2-3 years, the person shut them out, wouldn't talk. As soon as drugs got involved, heroin and cocaine, now you're facing 40 years, 50 years. People started talking. People started making deals.
As the internal structure of the mob crumbles, Hollywood gangster films thrive. The on-screen gangster has never been more real. In our faces, cocky, lethal.
I think it's the people who really make these movies that know it. Because they were written by people who've done it, who've lived it. I grew up there. Marty grew up there. De Niro grew up there.
Visionary filmmaker Martin Scorsese takes the gangster straight from the mean streets of New York.
I borrow money from you because you're the only jerk-off around here that I can borrow money from without paying back, right? Right? Because, you know, that's what you are. That's what I think of you, a jerk-off. You're smiling like you're a jerk-off. You're a fucking jerk-off. And I'll tell you something else, Mikey. I fuck you right where you breathe, because I don't give 2 shits about you or nobody else.
It wasn't a hard shoot for those guys that made that movie. All they had to do was watch these people in their environment. A whole gang of us went to an afternoon matinee to see that movie, and it was us on the screen.
I remember seeing Mean Streets and seeing this young, wiry guy, De Niro, whom I'd never taken notice of before. And he scared the hell out of me. I didn't think I was watching a performance. I thought I was watching somebody real. Talk about new. Talk about innovative. Talk about really breaking down the door.
The 1970s deliver a new outlaw for changing times. The black gangster emerges on the screen in a genre labeled blaxploitation.
Black exploitation, what the hell is that? What does that mean? Okay, who's being exploited? The concepts were changing. Now, blacks were heroes. We were winning the fights. When the smoke cleared, we were the ones left standing.
Now, let's look at Harlem. Tell me, who's going to control these people?
I learned from Humphrey Bogart, George Raff, James Cagney. These were gangsters. Today, there's a big difference between gangster and gangsta.
Those archetypes created by Cagney and Robinson and Bogart were so potent. Those types were then reinvented, rethought, reinterpreted by that newer generation. Brian De Palma decides to remake Scarface with Al Pacino. This time, this Scarface is the scourge of Miami. Forget the shame of a nation. He is the most out of control, over the top, repellent character in the world.
That's the ultimate of the bad guy. You know the bad guy is going to get it. You just have to find a clever way to let him have it so that you don't tear down the whole power structure that he has created throughout the film. You have to put him in a situation where he becomes self-destructive.
It's become a role model movie. Who'd have thunk it? A role model movie for all these would-be street gangstas.
No longer considered blaxploitation, the gangster from the ghetto must follow the same mob rules.
In America, the difference between black and white is green. If you can make people money, they forget what color you are.
Real-life mobster Henry Hill plays the dangerous game of not only making money for the mob, but hiding it from them.
You live like a millionaire because you spent every penny as quick as you got it. Because you might get killed tonight, so it doesn't matter whether you save a little. Fuck it, you can't take it with you. It's also a sense of being a part of something.
Henry's story is mirrored in Martin Scorsese's Goodfellas.
How do I know? You said I'm funny. How the fuck am I funny? What the fuck is so funny about me? Tell me. Tell me what's funny.
Get the fuck out of here, Tommy.
You motherfucker. I almost had him. You stuttering prick, yeah. Frankie, was he shaking? I wonder about you sometimes, Henry. You may fold under questioning.
I like Goodfellas because it's true to the mob. It doesn't really glorify these guys. It's, you know, I mean, you got guys that, you know, they're street level. They rob, they steal, they cheat, they kill each other.
Certainly there are people who, for whatever misguided reasons, might revere the mob. But if they actually sat down and thought very clearly about what they're doing, and that is that they kill people and that they commit crimes by victimizing people, I don't think they would revere them.
Ed McDonald was the federal prosecutor of the Organized Crime Strike Force in Brooklyn. He was a powerful man. He was one of the guys that led the fight against organized crime and took them all down. He played tapes to me where I heard to whack me, you know, from my boss.
Take it next week and be careful.
I was next, yeah, over some fucking money.
Well, Henry made the wrong choices. But which I think Goodfellas is one of the great films of all times, depicting these people. And in real life, it's a horrible existence being in the mafia, so it's not what it appears to be sometimes.
It's so surreal for me to talk about it, to sit there and to watch my life up there. I'm sure a lot of those actors wouldn't want to spend one day in the ranks of, you know, down in the ditches with you know, what those guys did.
Back in the 80s, Henry was probably one of the most important witnesses the government had. The information that he supplied to us enabled us to get orders allowing us to do electronic surveillance and to execute search warrants. In the last 10 or 15 years, the code of silence, omerta, has broken down, and often people now are deciding that they'd rather cooperate with the government than die in prison.
One such informant is Sammy the Bull Gravano. When he finds out that his infamous mob boss, John Gotti, is going to have him whacked, Sammy the Bull cooperates with the government to bring Gotti down. For years, John Gotti is nicknamed the Teflon Don by the press because none of the charges brought against him ever stick, until Gravano testifies and Gotti is sentenced to life in prison. John Gotti talks openly and jokingly with the press. He seems a modern-day Al Capone. While Gotti smiles for the press, Sammy the Bull Gravano tortures and kills his boss's enemies.
Tom, you can say anything you want because I've heard it all before. All you can do is pray for a quick death, which you ain't gonna get.
I don't know anybody that I've ever met in my life that knows more about movies than Quentin. I think he just has a sensibility of storytelling.
Director Quentin Tarantino creates a world of anonymous gangsters, each one an enigma to the other.
We don't see anybody as all good anymore, and we don't see anybody as all bad anymore. Hollywood's stock and trade in the 30s was good guys and bad guys. So you look at a film like Carlito's Way, and the lawyer character played by Sean Penn, who is supposedly representing, you know, justice.
You ripped him off, didn't you? Who? Tony T. You did take the $1 million, didn't you?
Yeah. You ain't a lawyer no more, Dave.
Dave. You a gangster now. You on the other side. Whole new ball game. You can't learn about it in school, and you can't have a late start.
Pacino finds a more straightforward set of rules on the street than he does out in the so-called real world.
The real world and the cinema collide once again in Martin Scorsese's version of the Las Vegas myth. Bugsy Siegel's Vegas serves as a backdrop for Nicky Santoro, played by Joe Pesci, and based on real-life mobster Anthony Spilotro.
No matter how big a guy might be, Nicky would take him on. You beat Nicky with fists, he comes back with a bat. You beat him with a knife, he comes back with a gun. And if you beat him with a gun, you better kill him, because he'll keep coming back and back until one of you is dead.
Nicknamed Tony the Ant, Spilotro is a vicious killer hired by the mob to protect the skim profits.
Motherfucker, you, huh? Oh, God. Give me the fucking name.
Charlie M.
Charlie M?
Charlie M.
Charlie M? You make me pop your fucking eye out of your head to protect that piece of shit?
Anthony and his brother are buried alive for being uncontrollable and untrustworthy. Two traits certain to bring about a death sentence from the mob. Once again, film reflects life as a young boy makes a choice in A Bronx Tale.
I saw a killing when I was 9 years old. I was on the stoop, just like in the movies. He killed to protect his friend. Right in front of me. I mean, literally from here to where the camera is. And I sat on the stoop, and he turned to me. You know, it was kind of slow motion. The next minute I knew, my father ran down the steps when he heard the gunshots.
I thought The Bronx Tale was a terrific movie. As Chaz did in life, he made a choice. He grew up in New York, and he made the choice to, you know, to go straight, become an actor, worked hard at it versus taking the easy way, being a gangster.
I tell your son to go to school, to go to
You
college.
don't understand. It's not what you say. It's what he sees. It's the clothes, it's the cars, it's the money, it's everything. Come on.
I befriended a lot of those guys, and I would throw the dice for them down the trap. And I became a guy, you know, and I looked up to all of them. I thought it was like a great thing to be a wise guy. But my father was always there, and he said, no, I'm the tough guy.
It don't take much strength to pull a trigger, but try and get up every morning, day after day, and work for a living. Let's see him try that. Then we'll see who's the real tough guy. The working man is the tough guy. Your father's the tough guy.
The guys that go straight, you know, they have that extra step of mental toughness to disregard the peer pressure and do what they feel is right. I went undercover as an FBI agent for 27 years. I was a natural. I didn't have to learn about the mafia because I grew up in a neighborhood that was mafia dominated, so I knew mob guys growing up. I knew when to talk, I knew when not to talk, I knew when to walk away from conversations, and that was all taken into notice as I was attempting my infiltration.
Joe Pistone's undercover work brings down the Bonanno Crime Organization, one of the most powerful mob families in New York.
Whatever we owe this week, everybody's chipping in because this year's a different ballgame. But let me tell you something. I think it's going to come to a head. We get stuck, he's going to come up with the money.
I got an answer. 50 grand a month. Kick up to Rusty every month. You know, one day I'm gonna die. I'm gonna be here in the same fucking room. All these same fucking guys talking about the same fucking scams. They never amount to nothing. Well, that's how I'll know that I've been sent to fucking hell.
My job was not to get people killed. My job was to put people in jail. And that's why prior to the operation being terminated, the FBI went to Sonny Black and told him who I was to warn him. But these guys were real gangsters in their tradition, and they never gave anything up.
He told me several times that he developed an affection for those guys, and they developed a love of each other in the way that men can love each other in that frame. At some point in time, I think he even felt a little guilt-ridden about turning everybody in. I know that he felt bad when they found Sonny floating in the river. That's why the FBI pulled him out and pulled him off, because he was getting too far in.
Even in the past, this whole concept of loyalty was really a sham, because so many people who were members of a particular family would kill the other members of the family. There was this code of honor which was really not adhered to all too often.
And that code insists, once you join the mob, there is no going back.
Don't want to burn nobody, even when I know I should. That ain't me now. Well, there wouldn't be much sense in trying to get away. I mean, where are you going to go? Another planet? These guys decide that your time is up, and that's it. I've been killed in movies a lot, and I know it's like very psychologically, it's, you always try to figure out some way to get out of it.
Television has brought the gangster into our living rooms. In 1962, The Untouchables appears on the small screen, documenting the FBI's pursuit of Al Capone. 25 years later, the series Wise Guy launches its first season. Then, in 1999, The Sopranos brings the gangster much closer. He is now the guy next door.
The success of The Sopranos shows the enduring fascination with the mob, but also an evolving look at it. We've seen so many aspects of gangland. We can now relate to gangsters in their homes, in our homes, and it does show, I think, that people continually are fascinated with gangsters, and now they're one of us.
The Sopranos could never have been made before this time. They're likable. They have charm. It's realism on somebody else's home base and not on ours, so we can vicariously imagine what it might be like, but we don't have to fear the fearful part.
Tony Soprano is not just the guy who can threaten to break your legs and you believe him. He's also the guy who can be worried about his daughter going to college. He's also the guy who has to try to negotiate with a strong-willed wife. We never saw any of those sides of Cagney or Robinson or any of those characters back in the 30s. They were what they were. Gangsters, pure and simple.
Trust, loyalty, and a code of silence. In the mob, the penalty for betrayal is death.
That's the tragedy of being tempted and going in one wrong step, thinking I could stop this anytime I want, and has a life of its own.
When I was in that life, I used to sleep with a gun underneath my pillow. You feared your best friend. You would put your life on the line for that guy every fucking day. And this is the way you get treated in the end, a fucking bullet behind your ear.
We are all tempted. We are all human. That's probably why people, romanticized the mafia, but this is not a good family. There's nothing to be proud of. I don't enjoy the association of Italians and the mafia. Some of the things in The Godfather that got woven through were threads that perhaps came from our family and have nothing to do with crime. There was always a longing towards art and beauty.
Everything was condoned for the sake of family. Francis' father was lead flautist for Toscanini, art and music and this and that and family. That's what he brought to the film, and I think that's the single most reason it was popular.
It is cinema that empowers the gangster, as we, the audience, crave only the most devilish, powerful, and enigmatic anti-hero.
Because it's flashy, because it's exciting. We want to see conflict, and we're better to get conflict than the mafia. Wow, you want conflict? Get inside that head.
I've made gangster films, I've made horror films, and there's a certain similarity. We are fascinated with horror.
Shakespeare didn't write about farmers and fishermen. He wrote about kings. And that's why there's such a fascination with the American mob, is that they see this power, they see it portrayed on the screen, and at the end of the movie, the hero has to fall.
The gangster invades popular culture throughout the world. The code is always the same in gangland cinema. As long as gangster films flourish at the box office, they will survive in Hollywood. On and off the screen, it's all about the dollars. And America tunes in. In 2002, John Gotti dies in prison. His son, John Gotti Jr., follows in his father's footsteps behind bars. Gotti's legacy is now a keen subject for a new form of entertainment, reality television.
The power structure in Hollywood we know about. That's a power that you don't have to succumb to anybody's concepts and ideas about what you want to do. That's power.
It's the same thing. It's just a different mob and a different level. They'll kill you with a fucking pen instead of a goddamn gun. At least in the mob, you know where it was coming from. They'll steal anything you got.
We all envy getting something for nothing.
It isn't Lucky Luciano, Al Capone, or even John Gotti today's mobsters long to be, but more like those flickering images that keep us watching.
So many people enjoy this, and I have to say I enjoy it too. We used to have an organized crime strike force film festival every year. And the first year we all voted, it was unanimous. We watched Mean Streets. The second year, I think we got Godfather 2. In the third year, we got Mean Streets. In the fourth year, we got Mean Streets. In the fifth year, we got Mean Streets. And of course, that was before Goodfellas came out.
Al Capone would often show his own print of Scarface to his friends. On the screen, he was captured as a character larger than life. But before his death, he wrote a note to Howard Hughes simply stating, "Thanks for the mythology."
Stai sempre camminando con mia zastavia. Non mangia chiò, non dorme chiò che pe confria. Tre picciari che per sta gelosia. Non posso afflitto con orecchi do fa fare. Ora in braccia do mamma, mi fa un scema picciari. Dilla tutta verità, che mamma te può capire. Ne passa e spassa sotto sto balcone, ma tu sei guaglione. Tu non conosci femmina, sei ancora così giovane. Tu sei guaglione che ti mise in capo per giocare a pallone. Che quando resti lacrime, a te non mi fa ridere. Corro in braccio a tua mamma, mi fa un scemo piacere. Dilla tutta verità, che mamma te può capire. La pitana lisciasti mustacilla, non so per te, non cerca te che l'occhio è bella, non pensa che pazzia che guagliongela, non t'ha felice di un buonito da inguaiare, chi desidera passare, scordate le piccerie, che ci dicono a papà, chissà come va a farmi. Ma basta squassa sotto sto balcone, ma tu sei guaglione. Tu non conosci femmina, sei ancora così giovane. Tu sei guaglione che ti mise in capo per giocare a pallone. E quando resti in lacrime, a te non mi fa ridere. Chi desidera passare, scordate le piccerie, che ci dicono a papà, chissà come va a farmi. Stai sempre camminando con mia zastavia. Non mangia chiò, non dorme chiò.